Unbelievable Mad Max tactics used by Ukraine to crush Russia. You have to see this to believe it. In a war dominated by drones, missiles, and high-tech warfare, no one expected this Ukraine unleashing battlefield tactics straight out of a Mad Max movie. With armored trucks turned into rolling fortresses, DIY war machines welded together from scraps, and fearless fighters pushing innovation to the edge of insanity, Ukraine is rewriting the rules of modern combat. And it's working. Against a much larger and better equipped Russian force, these wild, unpredictable strategies are punching way above their weight, turning the tide in key regions and stunning military experts worldwide. How are they doing it? Who's behind these battlefield innovations? And could this be the future of warfare? Stick around, because what's happening in Ukraine isn't just daring, it's redefining how smaller forces fight back when the odds are stacked sky high. What can a country possibly do when it's staring down an enemy with a military force that's massive, almost overwhelming in size? That's the dilemma Ukraine has been grappling with for over 3 years as it fights off Russia's full-scale invasion. And against all odds, Ukraine hasn't just survived, it's stunned the world with its bold thinking and battlefield creativity. From the start, Ukraine proved that being outnumbered doesn't mean being outplayed. It turned everyday drones into deadly weapons, using them to strike with precision where brute force couldn't. Its clever defensive tactics drained the strength from Russia's numerical advantage, slowly turning one of the world's largest armies into a tired, staggering version of its former self. But now Ukraine has taken things even further. It's come up with a tactic so wild, so daring it feels ripped from a post-apocalyptic action movie. Think Mad Max, but real, and it's working. On May 4th, Euromaidan Press reported that Ukraine's latest battlefield breakthrough is playing a crucial role in its recent operations in Belgorod Oblast, a Russian border region that's been the focus of intense fighting. This area, along with Kursk, has become a hotspot since Putin's forces drove Ukraine out of Kursk earlier this year. That victory gave Putin hope. He believed he was clearing a path to strike Ukraine's northeast, especially the city of Sumy, which he's been pounding with air attacks for weeks. But Ukraine had other plans. Instead of just defending, Ukraine flipped the playbook. Its new strategy is now forcing Russia to do the impossible, fight off Ukrainian assaults while continuing their offensive. And surprisingly, Ukraine's counterattacks are having more success than anyone in Moscow ever expected. So, what's the secret behind this new strategy? Defense analyst Ian Matveyev has the answer. Over the last 6 months, Ukraine has adopted a brutal, high-risk approach. They're deliberately using armored vehicles, yes, even tanks and infantry carriers as tools in a larger sacrifice. These machines are being sent straight into Russian defenses, not recklessly, but with a calculated goal: to punch through and leave a path behind. In the past, losing an armored vehicle in battle meant just that, a loss. But now Ukraine is making those final moments count. Even if a vehicle gets destroyed, it helps tear open Russian lines and forces them to scramble. It's no longer just a casualty, it's a weapon until the very end. It's as if Ukraine is saying, we'll pay in metal, not lives, and make our losses hurt you more than us. And here's the brutal reality. Every inch of ground Putin's army takes is costing them dearly. Over 963,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded since the invasion began. So while Putin thinks he's gaining momentum, Ukraine is making sure the price of that momentum is blooding his soldiers' blood. Ukraine may be outgunned, but it's never outsmarted. So what has all of Putin's bloodshed actually achieved? After 3 brutal years, all he has to show for it is control over just 20% of Ukraine. But here's the brutal math behind that number. For every 1% of Ukrainian territory gained, Russia has lost over 48,000 soldiers. Now compare that to Ukraine's approach. Instead of paying in blood, Ukraine is paying in engine oil, sacrificing hardware, not people. And that bold, unconventional strategy is quietly changing the rules of war. Rather than throwing waves of soldiers into meat grinders, Ukraine is using small amounts of Western-supplied equipment. Yes, some of it costly to seize Russian territory where old-school tactics would have failed. It's a calculated risk, and it's working in places no one expected it to. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of this strategy, let's take a step back and look at some classic combat math. For generations, military commanders have lived by the 3-to-1 rule. The idea is simple. To capture enemy ground, you need 3 times the firepower soldiers, tanks, gear as your opponent. So if Ukraine has 100 troops dug in, Russia would need to throw at least 300 at them to stand a chance. Why? Because defenders always have the upper hand. They get time to prepare lay landmines, set up artillery, dig trenches, and install brutal obstacles like dragon's teeth and barbed wire. So attackers usually have to chew through all of that before they even reach the fight. Now here's where it gets interesting. Putin has tried to follow that rule, but Ukraine turned out to be a lot tougher, smarter, and deadlier than he ever imagined. On average, Russia is losing 3 soldiers for every Ukrainian it manages to kill. That's why its so-called advances have been painfully slow. But still, Russia keeps pushing, sending wave after wave of troops. One gets destroyed, and another takes its place. It's textbook attrition warfare. This method grinds them down, overwhelm them with numbers might work on paper. But in practice, it's brutally expensive. It demands endless reserves of both manpower and gear. If you don't have enough of either, the entire strategy collapses. Imagine trying to storm a fortress with just double the troops instead of triple. That's when defenders start picking you apart, one by one. You lose more and gain less. It's a disaster in slow motion. And this is exactly the trap Ukraine has been trying to avoid from day one. Because while Ukraine has innovation, grit, and support from the West, it doesn't have the sheer numbers Russia does. Russia's ability to throw bodies at the front line despite staggering casualties is what has kept its offensive rolling. If Russia didn't have a massive population to pull from, this war would have looked very different. So Ukraine had to adapt. It couldn't outnumber Russia, so it outthought it. Instead of sticking to the 3-to-1 rule, Ukraine flipped the script using smaller forces, smarter tactics, and creative use of equipment to bleed Russia dry while preserving its own soldiers. That's where Ukraine's new strategy comes in, a strategy we'll break down in a moment. But one thing's already clear. In this war, brains are outmaneuvering brute force, and the battlefield is starting to tilt in unexpected ways. Here's the problem Ukraine has been dealing with since day one. It's the defending nation. That means every soldier it sends on offense is one less protecting the homeland. And against a country as big and relentless as Russia, Ukraine just can't afford to throw huge numbers into risky attacks without risking the security of its own cities and trenches. So for most of the war, the rhythm has been the same. Russia attacks, Ukraine defends, over and over. And honestly, that pattern might have continued until Russia eventually wore Ukraine down if Ukraine had stuck to the rulebook. But it didn't. Instead, Ukraine's military thinkers broke the mold. Defense analyst Ian Matveyev explains that Ukrainian generals proposed something radical. Small, fast-moving mechanized strike teams that rely on speed, not size, to break through. Here's the genius part. Ukraine started trading vehicles instead of lives. They'd send in small units to take a village or breach a position, maybe move forward 3 to 7 kilometers at a time. It wasn't about massive territory grabs. It was about sharp surgical gains that cost less in blood. And it's working. At the heart of this strategy is a vehicle that's been around since the Cold War, but is proving its worth all over again. The Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle, or IFV. As of late 2024, the US has supplied Ukraine with around 300 Bradleys. On the surface, it's not the flashiest piece of hardware, but in the hands of Ukrainian forces, it's a game changer. First rolled out by the US military in 1983, the Bradley has been updated over time, but still sticks to a simple principle: tough, mobile, and deadly. The core version Ukraine likely uses includes a rotating turret, a 25mm Bushmaster cannon that can tear through enemy troops, and a 7.62mm machine gun for added firepower. On top of that, it's got anti-tank missile launchers, smoke grenades for evasion, and armor strong enough to resist RPGs, shell fragments, and medium-caliber rounds. And despite its bulk, the Bradley can move. It tops out around 41 miles per hour and can cover almost 300 miles in a single mission. Is it the best IFV in the world? Number, it's old. Other nations have newer, shinier models. But the Bradley strikes the perfect balance of protection, firepower, and mobility, making it ideal for Ukraine's hit-and-run offensive tactics. Here's where it gets really interesting. Ukraine isn't using these vehicles the way they were originally designed to be used. Instead, it's gone full Mad Max mode, redefining how modern warfare works. Picture this: a strike battalion made up of 15 to 25 armored vehicles, mostly Bradleys, but mixed in with other gear too. Some are engineering vehicles like the American Max Pro MRAP. Others are Ukrainian-made like the BTR-4E Bucephalus. The only requirement? They have to be able to survive landmines and tanks. Believe it or not, they're optional. Ukraine barely uses them in these missions. Tanks are big, heavy, and slow, great for holding a line, but not ideal when you need to move fast and hit hard. Instead, Ukraine's tactics are about mobility, resilience, and sacrifice of machines, not men. They're rewriting the rulebook in real time, and in doing so, they're pulling off what once seemed impossible, taking ground from a larger army while protecting their own. It's bold, it's unorthodox, it's working. Before a single shot is fired, before a single soldier charges forward, Ukraine knows one thing: it needs to move fast. That's why this strategy isn't about brute strength. It's about precision, timing, and momentum. And at the center of it all, the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. It's not the flashiest tank killer on the battlefield, but it's fast, it's tough, and it can haul troops straight into enemy territory. Each Bradley holds 6 soldiers, plus a 3-person crew. So if Ukraine rolls out a dozen Bradleys, that's 72 soldiers flying into the fight, protected by armor and backed by serious firepower. But here's where the mission begins. The path needs clearing first. Ukraine sends in engineering vehicles, specially equipped machines, to clear minefields and blast through concrete obstacles that would stop the Bradleys dead in their tracks. These are the unsung heroes of the operation, and yes, some of them are lost in the process. But it's a price Ukraine is willing to pay, because what follows is the real breakthrough. Once the road is open, the Bradleys move in. If a mine slips through and one of the IFVs is hit, the armor usually keeps the troops inside alive. They bail out and continue on foot. But most make it through intact, storming toward their objective with brutal speed. And this is when the battle truly begins. The attack doesn't stop until they're inside Russian lines. The Bradleys rush toward their target, flying down roads or barreling across open fields if they have to. Their speed becomes their shield, too fast for most Russian drones or artillery to lock on. Still, Russia tries to stop them. Drones are deployed, some vehicles are hit. But even when a Bradley is disabled, it usually buys just enough time to get those soldiers close enough to hit the ground running and push the assault on foot. If a Bradley survives, it heads back to base. If not, Ukraine leaves it behind. It's done its job. To outside observers, it might look reckless, charging straight at Russian defenses with a convoy of IFVs. It sounds crazy, but it's been working again and again, especially in places like Belgorod and Kursk. Here's why. Russia built its border defenses for slow, predictable attacks. They planted massive minefields and left small groups of troops to hold territory. That works against a traditional army. But Ukraine isn't fighting by the old rules. They're exploiting the gaps. They've mastered the art of choosing the right targets places where Russian troops are thin or where Russia hasn't had enough time to set up full defenses. On top of that, Ukraine hits behind the lines with long-range missile and drone strikes, disrupting supply routes and weakening fortifications. It's a complete package: blinding speed, smart target selection, and constant pressure. And it's working better than Putin expected, better than he wants to admit. Just 2 days ago, on May 6th, Australia's SBS News reported that Ukraine had launched another surprise ground assault in Russia's Kursk region. That's huge. Putin had just cleared Ukrainian forces from that area a few weeks earlier. He probably thought he was in the clear. But once again, he was wrong. Ukraine's Mad Max strategy isn't just a bold tactic, it's a game-changing doctrine. It's proving that agility, brains, and a little calculated chaos can go toe-to-toe with brute force and win. The battlefield lit up in the dead of night. Russian Telegram war bloggers were the first to sound the alarm. Ukraine had struck again hard, fast, and with surgical precision. According to the pro-Russian RV Venka channel, it started under cover of darkness. Ukraine blew up key bridges with rocket strikes, severing critical Russian supply routes into Kursk. Come morning, the real show began. Ukraine rolled in with armored assault groups, leading with mine-clearing vehicles that punched open paths through deadly fields of explosives. Right behind them, infantry fighting vehicles, IFVs packed with soldiers, pushing straight to the front. A full-scale border battle erupted near the Russian village of Tyotkino, and from what's being reported, it's still raging. But if Ukraine's track record with this Mad Max-style strategy holds true, it's only a matter of time before part of Kursk is back in Ukrainian hands. Putin shouldn't be shocked. This playbook isn't new, it's just effective. Back in August 2024, Ukraine launched its first major assault using this exact strategy in Kursk, and it worked. They tossed out the traditional 3-to-1 rule of warfare, where the attacker needs 3 times as many troops to take ground, and replaced it with small, fast, mechanized strike teams. Instead of one big push, they hit multiple points on the border at once, creating cracks in Russia's defensive line. Larger Ukrainian units poured in through those gaps, and Kursk became a battlefield Russia struggled to hold. Now Ukraine's doing the same thing in Belgorod. The wreckage of a few Bradley's IFVs lies in Russian minefield sacrifices in a strategy that's already proving itself. Despite the mines and barriers, Ukraine is breaking through. As the Long War Journal noted back in March, Ukrainian forces have made real progress inside the Belgorod Oblast. They're not just hitting random spots either. Ukraine is targeting villages, rolling in with a mix of IFVs, tanks, and even ATVs, each unit slicing through defenses, one bite at a time. But they don't just drive in blind. Before the vehicles move, airstrikes hit Russian command posts. That's another core part of this Mad Max approach, cripple Russian logistics and leadership before troops ever set foot on enemy ground. The outcome? Russia is suddenly on the defensive in Belgorod, a region it thought was safe. Putin wanted to focus his forces on Ukraine's northeast, particularly Sumy, but Ukraine's making sure he's got problems on both fronts. Even President Zelensky confirmed the progress. On April 19th, he proudly stated, "In the Belgorod region, our warriors have advanced and expanded our zone of control." Once again, Ukraine has turned the tables not with overwhelming numbers, but with smart, fearless tactics. And once again, Putin is playing catch-up. In plain terms, Ukraine is taking back land from Russia fast, and they're doing it with a bold, unconventional strategy known as Mad Max. So what makes this wild-sounding plan so effective, especially compared to Russia's slow and often sloppy attempts to seize Ukrainian ground? It comes down to a few key ingredients: speed, smart engineering, reliable gear, and razor-sharp targeting. Meanwhile, Russia's approach? It's a mess of extremes that rarely hits the mark. As Euromaidan Press explains, the Russian military constantly lurches from one end of the spectrum to the other without ever finding a winning balance. On one side, they go full brute force, rolling out heavy tanks and armored vehicles, trying to smash through Ukrainian defenses like it's 1985. But Ukraine isn't fighting with old-school tactics. Their kamikaze drones, precision artillery, and rocket strikes tear through those slow Russian tanks long before they even get close. Once the armor's gone, Russian troops are stuck hoofing it across deadly ground, easy targets, and low on momentum. On the other end, Russia swings too far in the opposite direction, going light and fast, maybe too light. Now we're seeing soldiers sent into battle on motorcycles and even in regular civilian cars. Sure, they're quicker than Ukraine's armored Bradleys, but there's a huge trade-off: no protection. One landmine can turn a car into a coffin. And those motorcycles? While they're small enough to dodge anti-tank mines, they offer zero cover from drones, gunfire, or airstrikes. They can't break through barriers like barbed wire, and they're so loud that Ukrainian troops hear them coming from miles away. Bottom line, Russia's tactics feel outdated, sloppy, desperate. And when you throw in the lack of experience among many Russian units, it becomes clear Ukraine's Mad Max method isn't just different, it's smarter. But hold on, does this mean Ukraine has found the perfect formula to win the war outright? Not exactly. Military analyst Matt VF points out that Mad Max isn't some magical solution that will take back every inch of land. These operations work because they're targeted, focused, realistic. We're talking about taking a village 5 kilometers behind enemy lines, not launching a full-scale invasion. That precision is what makes it effective. So no, it's not about storming across Russia. It's about picking your shots, hitting hard, and making every gain count. And right now, Ukraine's doing just that. Let's break it down. Ukraine's Mad Max strategy isn't designed to conquer huge swaths of land in one go. It thrives in short bursts, using the speed and agility of its infantry fighting vehicles, IFVs, to strike fast and hit hard. Push too far, and the whole thing unravels. Supply lines stretch thin, troops get isolated, and enemy forces get time to react. But here's the kicker. That doesn't mean Mad Max can't deliver big results. Take Kursk, August 2024. Ukraine used the Mad Max playbook to punch holes through Russia's border defenses. Once the line was cracked, larger waves of Ukrainian troops poured in, sweeping up lightly defended villages and expanding control deeper into the oblast. So what's the secret sauce? Mad Max isn't the whole meal, it's the appetizer. It creates those small surgical breakthroughs that give Ukraine room to move. Its real magic is in scale and stealth. Instead of flooding the field with dozens of vehicles, Ukraine moves in with 15 to 20 Bradleys and engineering units, tight, efficient, and hard to track. But even then, there's a challenge. Ukraine only has around 300 Bradleys total. That's not a lot when every operation risks losing a few. Sure, any that survive are pulled back for reuse, but there's no guarantee when, or if, more will arrive from allies. That's why every target matters. Every raid is chosen with surgical precision. And here's where it gets interesting. Ukraine may not even need more Bradleys right now. Why? Because Russia keeps making the same mistake, overestimating its border defenses and underestimating how many troops it really needs to hold the line. Until that changes, Ukraine has room to keep unleashing its Mad Max strikes where they hurt the most. As military analyst Matt VF puts it, quality gear and solid training give Ukraine a powerful edge on key fronts. Even when outnumbered, they can seize the initiative, choose when and where to fight, and keep Russia off balance. That old rule that says you need 3 attackers for every 1 defender? Yeah, Ukraine's tossing that out the window. Because when you mix brains with boldness and just the right dash of madness, you can change the game. So what do you think? Is Ukraine rewriting the rules of modern warfare with its Mad Max strategy? What could Putin do to counter it, if anything? And where do you think Ukraine might strike next? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show for the latest updates on Ukraine's boldest tactics and the biggest shifts in military strategy from around the world.